Yeah, and you have a very wonderful quote in there about compassion. A lot of us, or some people, have the misconception that compassion means that we're soft, or that we don't fight, or that we maybe are allowing of everything, and we condone everything, and are just kind of nice all the time. But you say that compassion doesn't mean we don't fight, it means we don't hate. And so we can continue being compassionate as we fight for change. It's how we relate to the fight that really is the difference. And compassion, as you share so often, is love in the midst of suffering. And a lot of us struggle to hold a sense of love for ourselves during these times, or for others, especially for people who we disagree with or feel like are harming us in some way. So, would you be open to sharing a brief loving kindness meditation for us to help us to cultivate that sense of care and compassion in our hearts in the midst of these difficult times?
Sure. I mean, I think, love can have different flavors, and none of the flavors are weak or saccharine or sentimental, which is easy to believe they are. But there's a flavor which has to do with just, it's not even an emotion necessarily. It's a sense of inclusion. It's recognition that our lives are connected, that the construct of self and other and us and them that we live by is really just a construct. And it might be useful in certain circumstances, but it's just a construct. And the reality, going back to the word real, is that our lives are interconnected. So you might not like somebody at all, but there's a kind of bone deep recognition that our lives have something to do with one another. And it's moving from self and other to more a sense of we. And that is actually an interesting place to be looking at problem solving. Not that you need to convert somebody to your view, which may be impossible, or think that all views are equal, which I actually don't believe is true. Some are very diluted. But in the sense of care for the person, there's much more of a recognition. And I use the example in the book of one of my favorite little stories, which is I was riding in a car with a friend, and we were stuck in this incredible, terrible traffic and complained bitterly about it the whole time. And then my friend looked at me and said, "Well, we're the traffic too, you know." And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. It's like that presumption. I mean, that it really is a state of privilege, that presumption of centrality. Like, it's my road. You are an interloper in the way, slowing me down, get out of the way. But what about when that centrality, which is a mistaken notion, drops away? And it's like, oh, we're all the traffic. That is actually realistic. That's the truth of life. And there's something that echoes in loving kindness for somebody in that sense. We're not saying we like them, we approve of them, we want to spend any time with them. We're not going to fight their agenda. It's none of that. But we have that sense of linkage. And I try to use that in a lot of different ways. Like, often going into an organization or going into a company to teach, I will say to people, how many other people need to be doing their job well for you to do your job well? Because, in fact, we feel so independent. It's part of why we feel so lonely. But in truth, we are relying on so many people. And we're relying on people we normally might ignore or disdain or objectify in some way. Like, I was talking to the doctor who's the head of this big medical practice in the hospital, and he said, who I'm really starting to appreciate in a whole other way is the cleaning staff. And I thought, yeah, like, isn't it true? Or I was recording a meditation on loving kindness, and maybe we'll include some of this in the one that we do for this journal. And so they chose a meditation out of the book. And when we do loving kindness practice, we silently repeat certain phrases. That is really the resting place for our attention. And the phrases are meant as like gift giving or offering. May you be happy, may you be safe, something like that. And we go through these various categories of recipients for that offering, beginning with ourselves. And then depending on how much time we have, maybe somebody we really are grateful to, and onward. And then we come to this category known as the neutral person. So the neutral person is someone we don't especially like or dislike. It's someone we feel kind of neutral toward or indifferent to, usually. And very often we suggest that you choose someone in your life that you're bound to run into now and then, because you may not feel much difference in your actual formal meditation, but you'll notice a difference after a while when you do see them. So probably for 45 years, my colleagues and I have been saying, like the checkout person in the supermarket, they're the perfect person. We don't care anything about them usually. We look right through them. We're completely indifferent to them. So I was reading this out loud. It was being recorded by this journalist, and I went, whoops, look at that, How do we think we get to eat, like really? And so the sense of inclusion is really at the heart of loving kindness. And that can happen even without liking somebody, that recognition, okay. And then also the flavor of loving kindness that is compassion, I think, can really happen for some of these people that we really dislike, which doesn't mean giving in, and it doesn't mean, getting all woo about it. But again, it's that obsession with their faults. And sometimes I think, in all honesty, imagine living a life where you make some choices, or maybe many choices, so that you're so reviled by so many people that if they heard you had a terminal illness, they'd rejoice. I think, what a life, and what a waste of a life, when I really believe as human beings, we are capable of greatness, just like an ordinary human being. We're capable of greatness of heart. And to become that small and contracted and divided and separate and cruel, I think, I do feel compassion, which I don't feel weakens me in any way. I don't think it holds me back in any way. So why don't we do some loving kindness practice? And of course, it'll be rather brief and somewhat truncated in how many beings we can make this offering to. I say beings because it might be like a puppy, it may not be a human being, but we'll do a little bit together.